Hi, it's time for another verb of the day. Today's verb is tangle, and this particular verb comes from a recommendation or suggestion by the viewer Luis, so I just want to say a special thanks to Luis. Now, let's take a moment and review some of the definitions or the ways that we can use this verb tangle. The first way you might encounter can mean to twist together in a confused mass. Now, where I live, it was so windy today. As I walked outdoors, right, my hair was blowing, and right, this is the exact word I was thinking of, right? My hair became kind of twisted together in kind of an ugly and confused mass, or we could say it became tangled. A second way you might encounter this verb means to become involved in either a conflict or a fight with someone else. We'll see some examples of this a little later, but you should know that it's pretty common to hear this used frequently in sports. So this fight can really sometimes be as much of a competition as it is like an actual disagreement kind of fight. For now, you should know that tangle is a regular verb. If you want to make the progressive form of this verb, drop the E on the end and then add ing. That forms tangling. The past tense and the participle form of our verb can be made by just adding the letter D, since this verb already ends in an E. Now, our base verb, tangle, ends in a voiced sound. The ending sound there is the L or O sound. This means when I add that ed ending, I'm just going to make a D sound, and I'm not going to add an extra syllable to the verb when I say it. So the past tense and the participle form of the verb should sound like this: tangled, tangled. Now, you might encounter this verb with some phrasal verbs, so let's discuss those. The first one many people use is to tangle up. This can have a few different meanings. One way just describes that action of something becoming tangled. So again, think of that kind of confused mass. So an example of this in a sentence: how did you tangle up these strands of Christmas lights? Whether you celebrate this holiday or not, in the United States, I think it's kind of a common joke in a way that no matter what people seem to do, these strands of little flickering or sparkly lights inevitably kind of become mixed up, and sometimes it forms this kind of ball that cannot seemingly be unwound. A second way you might encounter tangle up means to entangle or ensnare someone or something in something else. That ensnare is kind of like to catch, hold, or keep something. So an example of this in a sentence: spiders tangle up their prey in webs. Right? This is how they eat, right? They can catch other insects in their web and devour them later. A third way you might encounter tangle up can mean to involve oneself or someone else in a particular issue, a problem. Sometimes you'll even hear it used in connection to a scandal. So, an example of this in a sentence: they have tangled us up in so many lawsuits. Right? So they've kind of involved us or made us a party to these actions. Finally, the last phrasal verb we'll discuss is to tangle with. This connects most closely to the second definition of the verb we discussed earlier. So this is being used to describe fighting, arguing, or engaging in some type of dispute with someone else. An example of this: I wouldn't tangle with them. They never lose, right? So here someone is maybe suggesting don't fight, don't argue, or don't get into some type of dispute. It's not worth it. You're not going to win. Now let's continue using our verb of the day in a couple different verb tenses. Today we'll practice the past perfect and the simple future with a focus on be going to. Let's start with the past perfect. We use this verb tense to talk about a completed action. But what makes it different than just the simple past tense is we're noting this action occurred before another action or before a certain point in the past. You'll notice two P's in the name of this verb tense, past perfect. This can help you remember that you will need two parts to make your verb. So in the affirmative, you're going to see the subject, then you'll see the past form of have, which is had, and then you'll see that participle form of our verb. And because this is a regular verb, it's the same as the past tense. Let's take a look at an example. The baby's umbilical cord had tangled around his neck twice while in the womb. Right? So, again, that idea, right, of something kind of becoming a confused mass, going maybe in a direction or a place where we don't want it here. This is certainly a scary and potentially life-threatening issue for a child. So that is what the sentence is describing there. Now, let's take a look at a negative past perfect sentence. To do this, again, you start with your subject, use had, not, and then the participle form of the verb. Here's an example of this. The Titans and Blue Devils hadn't tangled on the gridiron since 1977. So in this sentence, here, gridiron might be kind of a new term, but it's frequently used in American football to refer to kind of the playing field or the playing surface there. So here, this sentence is describing two teams that hadn't played each other. So that idea of kind of competing against one another. Finally, if you want to make a yes or no question in the past perfect, start with had, then you'll have your subject, and then the participle form of the verb. Here's my last past perfect example. Had you tangled with her previously? Right? So maybe someone was talking about a disagreement, a dispute they had with someone, and they're kind of wanting to know, had this happened earlier? Now let's move on and look at some sentences in the simple future. Today we're going to focus on making sentences with be going to. When we use this form to talk about future actions, we're going to have to pay attention to our subject. And that's because we'll be using a present form of be. So, to make affirmative sentences, if your subject is I, use am going to, and then the base verb. If your subject is you, we, or they, use are, A-R-E, going to, and the base verb. And finally, if your subject is he, she, or it, use is going to, and then the base verb. Let's take a look at an example sentence. Any kind of plastic bag is going to tangle around machinery that rotates at the recycling center. So don't put plastic bags in these containers. Okay. I saw a sentence very similar to this as I was looking for examples of Tangle, and this particular article was talking about how bad Americans are at recycling and kind of following the rules and knowing what can and cannot be. So this particular article was noting in this community, you cannot recycle the plastic bags you might find at a grocery store or convenience mart of some kind. Now let's talk about making a negative simple future sentence. If you want to do this, again, we're going to pay attention to our subject, so we use the correct form of be. Then we'll use not going to, and then the base verb. Here's another example. A crocodile isn't going to tangle with a humpback whale. Okay. Again, I saw an example of this in a particular news story where some whales had gotten into a particular area of Australia where there are many crocodiles, and people were a little worried. Biologists or the scientists were trying to say, no, don't worry. A crocodile is not going to try and swim up or attack this huge kind of creature. Finally, let's look at making a yes or no question in the simple future. To do this, start with your form of be. Whatever form matches your subject, that subject should come next. Then we'll use going to and our base verb. Here's my last example. Are the two teams going to tangle this season? So again, the idea, they're going to compete against one another. Now, let's spend a moment and look at some words that are related to our verb tangle. The first word we'll discuss is just the noun form of this word. The noun tangle has the exact same spelling and the exact same pronunciation as our verb. And just like the verb, the noun tangle can be used in a couple different ways. One way to use this noun is to refer to that confused mass of things that have been twisted together. So, an example that connects to something I mentioned earlier, you might look at someone and say, oh, your hair is full of tangles, right? It's not kind of neatly combed, neatly organized. Now, a second way you might encounter this noun is to refer to some type of fight, argument, or a disagreement of some kind. So, an example of this. The two players got into a tangle under the basket. So this sentence, again, I saw so many sports examples. You're probably noticing that here too. But this particular article was recapping a particular basketball game and kind of talking about this fight that broke out under the basket. Now let's talk about a related verb, and that related verb is untangle. And this is actually how I got the inspiration for this video. Luis specifically said, hey, let's talk about that. And I thought, oh no, we'll incorporate it here as part of a larger discussion of the verb tangle. So that prefix un, you might recognize as meaning not. So our verb untangle could mean, or I should say one way to use it, would be to free from tangles or to get it out of a twisted state. So an example of this, we must untangle these cords right now. So maybe this happens at your house. You have different chargers for phones and maybe lamps or lights and other electronics. And then you look and all those cords are kind of twisted and if you want to untwist or make them into a neater state, we could use that verb. Now, a second way you might encounter untangle can mean to make something that is complicated or confusing easier to understand, or to take something that is really complicated and make it easier to deal with. So make it easier to handle might be another way. So an example of this. I've been untangling my friend's estate for nearly 4 years. And this is an unfortunately true sentence. I had a friend pass away a few years ago. She asked that I assist with this process of administering her estate. But what she said she wanted and what she communicated in one document didn't match what she had done in others. It has been a very complicated and confusing mess. And through the help of various accountants and attorneys, we have been trying to take this complicated state and deal with it to follow her wishes. So, well, again, I want to say a special thank you to Luis for suggesting today's verb. I thank you all for watching, and I hope you have a great day.